In progress.
Welcome,
Okay.
everybody.
Welcome everyone to Temple Aaron. Thank you
Hi,
for being
everybody.
here.
Hi, Neil. Where are you?
I'm at home. Just a backdrop.
Oh, it's a cool ceiling.
Technology. That's at the temple.
Oh,
That's the
oh,
Bema. That's the Bema at the temple.
oh, I thought that was your house.
Yeah. No, not quite. Yeah.
All right.
I'm there
All right,
now. But
ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to Mantua, New Jersey, where I am back. I had to come home this week, and so I'm back in my study where I spend most of my life. So it's pretty fun. Um, let me first of all, thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you tonight about the third in our series. We have one more to go next week. Next week, we're going to take a look at this explosion of new rituals, and which I'm very excited to share with you because it's it's just wonderful to see what's happening around the Jewish community about the creation of these rituals. And we're going to talk about everything from prayers and meditations um, that um, upon like signing an advance directive, all the way to a conversation that we have every time I do this workshop on the redefinition of adultery in light of Alzheimer's and dementia. So that's next week. That's next week. And a bunch of other things about cohabitation and it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. Actually, it's a lot of fun. But tonight, uh, building upon the theology thing, and then last week the health and wellness thing, the health and wellness thing is flowing right into a workshop or a conversation that we like to call making sacred decisions as life ebbs. So, what I'm going to try and do with you um, is first of all give you an overview, a hint, a touch of an approach that we have in the Jewish tradition, and this is across the denominational lines, of the idea of medicine and the doctor, some of the proof texts that allow us to do this, and then go into a theory of decision making and uh, try to lay out for you using this theory how you can conceptualize making a Jewish decision, a decision about the end of life based upon Jewish tradition, not necessarily medicine or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but there are guidelines within Judaism that um, will be that are very helpful. Um, don't know whether you've touched any of this before, but we're going to go into a little bit of depth. So, as usual, for those of you who've been here the last couple of weeks, if you have a question or something, either raise your hand, throw something at the screen, or if you can figure out how to raise your hand electronically on the Zoom machine, do that. Um, now, so I'm going to try and do something that probably, well, we tested it before you all got here. So let's see if I can do this. I'm going to try to share my screen. Can I do that now without being co-host? Can I do that?
It worked before, so it should work
Okay.
now again.
Okay.
Just go give it a try.
So if
you have
you
to
would now,
allow participant to share.
okay,
Allow
no,
him.
I'm
You
going
know,
to
he did it
click,
before. He tested it.
Okay.
I'm going
All
to
right.
click on share, and I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to click on share.
There we go.
There we go.
Son of a gun, it worked. All right.
Yeah.
Every time I have a success electronically, I'm very surprised. So this gives you an insight. Can everybody see this thingy?
Oh,
No, Jeffrey, you can't see it.
way too small.
Okay, I'm going to try and pump up the font.
If you click, yeah, click on that little plus sign. There you go. Oh,
Is that
that's
Jeffrey? Is that better?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
thank you.
thank thank you.
So this is a prayer attributed to Maimonides in the 12th century, but it was not. It was written by a German physician, Jewish German physician in the 19th century. But I want to start out with this because it gives you an insight into a traditional view. God, supreme God in heaven, before I begin my holy work to heal the human beings whom your hands have formed, I pour out my entreaty before your throne of glory that you grant me the strength of spirit and great courage to do my work faithfully, and that the ambition to amass riches and goodness shall not blind my eyes from seeing rightly. Give me the merit to regard every suffering person who comes to ask my advice as a human being, without my distinction between rich and poor, friend and foe, good person and bad. When a person is in distress, show me only the human being. If physicians with greater understanding than mine wish to teach me understanding, give me the desire to learn from them, because there's no limit to the learning of medicine. But when fools insult me, I pray, let my love of the profession strengthen my spirit without any regard for the advanced age of the scorning and their prestige. Let the truth alone be a lamp unto my feet, for every yielding in my profession can lead to perdition or illness for a human being whom your hands have formed. I pray you, compassionate and gracious Lord, strengthen and fortify me in body and soul, and implant an intact spirit within me. Okay, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go back to the thing. If I can figure that, if I can do this, it's a miracle. Any reaction? That's the physician's prayer. Any reaction to that? The theology is right at the end. You form these people. Give me the strength to carry out my job. Any reaction to that? It's pretty straightforward. Once, twice. Okay. So this is attributed to Maimonides. It's a 19th century prayer. We begin with an understanding. Oh, okay. Rach, am I pronouncing it right? Rachmana
Yeah,
from Rachmanis.
yeah.
Where are you
That's just
located?
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's just so beautiful. And I would say it's well, I agree with Andrea that we should get access to a copy of it. Um, I think it has to do with any of us in any exchanges we have with anyone, including with ourselves. Thank
Oh,
you for
yeah.
bringing it forward.
Yeah. You know something? What I can do is I have this all printed out. Actually, did it electronically. If you want, I can send the electronic copy of this study guide. In other words, if we were in a room face to face, I give you all this actually printed out the old-fashioned way without PowerPoint and everything.
That would be great,
You
Rabbi.
know, you could sit and write notes during the class and everything, or pass notes to the person next to you. But I can do that to so you can then distribute it. Um,
That'd be great.
yeah, I can do that tomorrow, or if I'm yeah. So anyway,
I will need people's email addresses
yeah,
if I don't have everybody's email address. So if you, some of you, I do, a lot of you I do, but for those who don't, put it in the chat if you would, and then I'll be able to send that to everybody.
okay, and I'll take care of that tomorrow.
Thank you.
So in like last week, you can look at some of the prayers in the prayer book for justification or proof text. Um, and then we did last week a lot of a conversation about Maimonides, and we went through some of the Maimonidean texts on health and wellness, etc., etc. But the texts themselves also had to solve a very interesting problem. If everything comes from God, if everything comes from God, then it would stand to reason that illness comes from God. And in truth, there are religious traditions who model and say, well, if you get sick, something you're this is there's a reason for this. There's a reason for this. And indeed, if you look at the book of Job, if you've ever studied the book of Job, which is a really fascinating book to study, the friends who come and visit Job say, well, this misfortune that has befallen you, you must have done something wrong. You know, you have to really think back in your life. You're being punished, as opposed to what the book of Job is. It's a bet between Satan and God saying, we're going to screw around with this guy and see if he blasphemes you. So there are texts within the Jewish tradition that give permission to heal somebody, they give permission to interrupt the natural flow of life. Because a long time ago, even in biblical times, uh, the Jewish tradition figured out that if you get sick, um, you have to have some ability to help you get cured or healed. And so, Harofeh, the doctor, is the person who's the healer in Hebrew, Rofeh. Any of you physicians, so in case I really mess up, you can correct me. Don't be ashamed. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. All right,
I'm
some
not
of
a doctor, but I work in medicine.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say you're not a doctor, but you play one on TV.
That would be a lot more fun, I'm sure.
So, Andrea, okay. Well, if your husband's around, you can grab him. Um, so these are texts that basically say, okay, where we have to figure out a way that you can go interfere into what is happening with a person. And the way we do those things is we go back and look at texts. So now you should be familiar with that for the last couple of weeks. Everything we do in Judaism, and especially in Jewish sacred aging, the stuff that we do, you'll see this again next week, is based upon how we interpret certain text. And obviously, how you interpret text may very well be relatable to how you were raised, which denominational structure you're in, because different denominational or different approaches will have different approaches of how they interpret a text. So if you are coming from the Orthodox tradition, those texts were given by God at Sinai and interpreted throughout Jewish history in the oral law by scholars who would hold that more fundamental belief. In the non-Orthodox community, we were trained to say that these texts were creations of human beings. And so the nature of the authority changes. So, for example, here's a text that's going to come up in, I think, probably next week. If you heed, it's from Exodus 15:26. If you heed the Lord your God diligently, doing what is upright in God's sight, giving ear to God's commandments, and keeping all the laws, then I will not bring upon you any of the distresses that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer, Rofecha. God is the healer. You pray to God for healing. Almost every single synagogue now, on a Friday night or Shabbos morning, will do the prayer for healing, the Mishaberach. The Mishaberach. Okay? The theology of that is you're asking for this intervention. There's another text down the road from 15 in chapter 21 talking about if people get into a fight, and if somebody gets hurt, they have to pay. You must pay for the idleness, distress. It's compensation. I lost work. I lost time at work. You have to pay for that lost time, in essence. And the end of the verse has a double use of the word rofeh, the rofeh yirapeh, and heal, you shall be healed. So if you believe that the Torah is from God, why is there a repetition of the same word? Why didn't you just say he'll be healed? And that is an emphasis, according to the tradition interpretation, that healing is a major mitzvah, that you have to do everything in your power. Leviticus 19, the holiness code, probably some of you know this verse. Do not stand idly by the blood of one's kinsman, of your neighbor. Means you're obligated to relieve suffering. Then there's a passage in the Babylonian Talmud that I referred to before with Alan that talks about the concept from Leviticus that the mitzvot are given so that we should live by them, not die by them. So again, the emphasis on these commandments are given to enhance life. Life is important. You must do everything in your power to secure life, to save life, etc. Um, and the Talmudic phrase, even to the extent of surpassing Shabbat, pikuach nefesh doche et ha-Shabbat. That's a Talmudic phrase which says pikuach nefesh, the saving of a life, doche et ha-Shabbat, allows you to supersede even the laws of Shabbat. So you have, this is just samplings of texts. One of the books that I will refer you to, if you are so interested, is a book called Religion and Medicine by Jeff Levin, Levin. He's an epidemiologist at Baylor Medical in Waco, Texas. I think I may have mentioned he did a podcast for us a couple of years ago when the book came out, and he really takes a look at um, the entire enterprise of religion and medicine and where they have linked together from a multi-religious perspective, not just Judaism, but he talks about other religions as well. It's a really interesting book if you're interested in anything like this. And it's just a fascinating. It's not a beach book, okay? It's not not a book you're taking on the airplane for fun, and it's a heavy book. Okay. So we have in the beginning, as we learned last week, and I just alluded to this week, we have an emphasis on life, the preservation of life, the dignity of life, the saving of life. It is a major right, l'chaim. If I have my Diet Coke, it's l'chaim, or whatever beverage of your choice. So, if you were able to do a in-depth study of all the Jewish tradition and texts, and the goal of that study was saying, I want to reduce all of these texts that have to do with medicine to one sentence so that I can just kind of understand this. Here is my suggestion. This, I would suggest to you, is the fundamental ethic of our tradition when it comes to the subject of medicine and us. It is the dignity and sanctity of human life and the preservation of human life in dignity and in sanctity. Okay? The preservation of human life in dignity and sanctity, and the preservation of that human life in dignity and sanctity. Okay? The dignity and sanctity, preservation of human life in dignity and sanctity. Now, that's it. Now, some of you may be saying, time out. Oh, wow. I get these news flashes on the computer because I'm a news junkie. Evidently, the new president has just revoked the executive order about sanctioning Israeli settlers who attack Palestinian settlers. And that's all the headline said. No doubt some of you then would say, after looking at that fundamental ethic, what the hell does that mean? It doesn't make any sense. The dignity and sanctity of human life and the preservation of human life and dignity and sanctity. The words dignity and sanctity, what is it? There are 18 people on this call. Probably we could get 18 different nuances of the words dignity and sanctity, and they could change depending upon where you are in life. Now, some of us have been around this block, and that's why we now move into the more delicate parts because this part, the other stuff is easy. You just look at the text and try to interpret it. And even the concept of the fundamental ethic sounds really nice. But, so my question then to you is if this is the fundamental ethic, and I'm going to, for the sake of this, I'm going to suggest that this is the fundamental ethic, how do we apply that to real life situations? How do we apply that to human beings? Some of you may know these people right now, um, who are having to make very interesting and challenging decisions about their life. How do you make a Jewish decision? You can make a medical decision. Okay. Christy, I was a guest speaker numerous times, and we're Christo.
Okay, it just brought to my mind, I used to be a guest speaker numerous times at a local Unitarian Universalist community, and they go by 7 or 8 principles, and their first one they always emphasized in their services is the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Yeah, they're Jewish.
They got it from Judaism, clearly.
Oh no, half the Unitarians are Jewish. I gave it last year. I think it was the end of the pandemic. I was invited to speak on some of this stuff at the Unitarian Church in Cherry Hill. I walked in there, it was like going to a brotherhood and sisterhood meeting at the local temple. Uh, it's like it was very hysterical. And the ethical culture people born in Philly, down on Rittenhouse Square. Um, but the dignity and sanctity, Christo, are common to if you or the texts of most religions. That's pretty much fundamental. The problem, though, of course, is the application of those terms. So, how do you take that fundamental ethic and apply it to real live people in real live situations? So I'm going to suggest to you, and this is now we enter the stage of this is a theory that I've developed based upon my rabbinate and it's my studies and a lot in just dealing with people in the last half century. So feel free to disagree. I mean, but I'm going to lay this out to you. You can play with it, chop it, slice it, dice it, whatever. But it is good for conversation. I happen to believe it. So I'm going to suggest to you, and you'll pardon my sports imagery, 3 wild cards that impact how we make a decision as life begins to end. Those 3 wild cards are autonomy, technology, and spirituality. Autonomy, technology, and spirituality. Autonomy, personal autonomy. This is very, very challenging to liberal religion and steps off the theological foundation of that physician's prayer. Because it's not God who's in charge. Am I in charge? So who's in charge of your life, each one of you? I'll ask you, who's in charge? Is God ultimately in charge? Do you make a decision based upon Jewish text and tradition and what you've been taught about what God says? Or to paraphrase an old movie, I think from the 70s or 60s, it's my life. Whose life is it anyway? It's my life. I will make the decisions based upon what I think. Anybody? Sherry, you were shaking your head.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I guess I just think of it, well, God did give us brains to make decisions with. So, while we're here, I just feel like, yes, it's incumbent on us to make the best decisions we can about the things that we can control. That's all.
No. And in truth, you have the dichotomy of Rabbi Akiva's statement in the 2nd century as God grants us free will to so we have free will because God decided we have free will, so that we really have free will. Um, the autonomy thing is fascinating because it does conflict with tradition about how much control I have over my own body, and the control myth comes up every high holidays. What's the major prayer in the high holidays?
Oh,
It's called the Unatana Tokef. The Unatana Tokef is a prayer, very long, ponderous, uh, very serious music. It's the prayer, Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written. On Yom Kippur, it is judged who shall live, who shall die, who by fire, who. That's the Unatana Tokef. It's a reminder that we think we control a lot of stuff. We don't control much of anything of importance. So, um, Nancy, wherever
hi.
you are,
It, as a nurse, and what you were saying about dignity and, the whole premise. And I have been involved in many with people with end of life decisions. And way back before, being able to die, choose to die, and all that. I think as the difference between our subjective need and our objective need is the people we're working with. Now I'm talking professionally when you're talking about medicine and everything. It is really about what the person wants. But also, I remember, I'm just going to give a quick example. This is way back in like 1971 when I was working on a psych unit at Massachusetts General Hospital. And one of the patients had come in and she had been suicidal. She also had cancer. And what happened was, she'd also had mental health problems. But by having her work out her issues around suicide, and you can put this not just then, but what really impressed me back then and still does, is that she was able to work out the fear, the depression, the whole issue of dying, and then work with her family so that they weren't left with all that goes on when someone dies, and especially if someone commits suicide. So I think we have to be very careful, and I've worked also with other people over the years, that we don't project. We can't project at end of life decisions. And I think we have to be very astute. And this goes back to what we're saying about basic dignity. And yes, is it part of the patient? Is it? I think the God, what we do, it's all one. I think we're not careful enough now to not project what we think, even in the right to die, is our opinion and not what's right for the patient. I think this is such an ethical issue, and sometimes we're getting a little knee jerk about it. We haven't done enough with it, but I think it really is to be objective. It's different if you're on the street and somebody calls you a name, you can say, well, up yours too, honey. But with patients, if they say, well, you're a dirty Jew or something, I said, really? Have you had trouble with Jews? You have to just stay. And that is what we're talking about in terms of how we should be as human beings, especially today. Because I can't, when you just talked about the news, I didn't watch the inauguration, but I was watching some of the clips and the commentary. I mean, right. He just, pardoned all the January 6th, horrible
well, we
insurrection.
don't. We're not going to get into the
No, but it's the
because we'll be
same.
here for about 4 years.
No, but it's the same. We're applying the same principle, I think, in everything. Anyway, that's it.
So, to your original point, the need for conversation and training on how to have these conversations, not only in professionals, but also within congregations, because I'm a believer that every congregation has to have these conversations every single year. You must teach people what the Jewish tradition is, because the majority of our people have no idea that Judaism has all this to say about it. And they will run off and feel guilty about things and make decisions that they think is right. And 2 years later, they found out that there was another option. So the training is absolutely important. So this autonomy issue, and we're going to come back to that if we have time, which I hopefully we do, about the contemporary challenges of medical aid in dying. And because the autonomy issue is at all three of these wild cards are being played out. So the autonomy issue really is, how much control should I have over what happens to my life in my body? And this gets played out more and more and more in the non-traditional communities. There's a formula that I have developed even for how what goes into some of the things that make up how we make a decision. And it's a long conversation. We probably don't have the time to do it now, but it's a formula that goes GC plus FO plus R equals S. S stands for who we are, self. The GC stands for the genetics, our genetic code. In other words, whether we like it or not, we are all we carry with us the genetics of where we came from. And I often tell people I would like to be 6'5" of 180 pounds of rock hard muscle. But if you knew my mom and my dad, you knew that probably, no matter I could work out 24 hours, that probably isn't going to happen. FO, which is really, I think, more important for any therapist in here, stands for family of origin. All those tapes that were put in up here when we were in the womb in those first 4, 5, 6 formative years by our parents, they're still there. Some people spend thousands and thousands of dollars trying to erase those tapes. The tapes never go away. What we can learn is how to deal with and how to understand those tapes. But the messages that are put into us by our family of origin, I will submit to you, never really leave us. The R stands for the randomness of life. This becomes much more important as we get older. That we can make a decision based upon perhaps our genetics, how we were raised, but we certainly cannot control the randomness of our own existence. Some of the randomness is really good. You got hired, you didn't expect to get hired. There's a whole new opportunities opening up to you. Some of the randomness is not so good. Some people some people on this call may have had the experience of getting that call from the doctor's office saying, we need to see you, your tests have come back, and they're not good. You didn't expect it? Random. Now, there's a theology, remember, that says this is not random at all. There's a scientific approach, and there's a spiritual approach. How we choose to deal with the randomness of our existence often determines who we are. And I will get, if we had the time to unpack all the 18, 17 people, 19 people on this call, every single one of us could give us chapter and verse example of knowing something like this. I would be shocked if somebody said, no, I've never had an experience like this in my life. So autonomy is the first wild card. It's very important, especially in our society, which America prizes autonomy. If you remember your history classes, your American history classes in high school or college, you study the fact that we are a culture, America has a culture of fierce independence and autonomy. You have no right to tell me how to paint my house. Second wild card, medical technology, of which there should be a blessing in every prayer book. Because I will also guarantee you, given the people on this call, that some of us, if not all of us, know people who, thanks to medical technology, they're walking around enjoying life right now. Because 20 years before, you would have gone to their funeral. Medical technology, very, very important. It underscores, as Christo was alluding to, the passage in Deuteronomy, which talks about making choices that sanctify life. There's that word again. Sometimes those choices will sanctify life. Sometimes the choices that you think will sanctify life will shorten life. When is that permissible? Medical technology also alludes to the fact that we live in this age of information.
What?
I'm sure you're muted.
Yes.
You're not muted yet. Um, this age of information, which we live in, which can be very destructive and very beneficial. We live in a phrase that I love. I don't remember where I stole it from, but it's a phrase that says we live in an age with a promiscuity of information. It's a great phrase. We live in an information age, a promiscuity of information not necessarily equal to the amount of wisdom being given to us by that information. That's a high holiday sermon, which you're not getting. But there's a lot of information out there, not so much wisdom. Not so much wisdom. And just because we have the medical ability to do something doesn't always necessarily mean we should. And that's going to come up to be very important. The third wild card is the spiritual wild card, which rarely gets played in these conversations, but I need to bring it up because rabbis, clergy, nurses, Nancy, I'm sure you've had to find that this becomes extremely important when I have to start making very, very serious decisions about the end or of my life or dealing with serious illness. What do I believe? What do I want? How do I wish to be spoken to? What is my faith regarding certain things like life after death? Is my religious tradition telling me that this is just the beginning, the anteroom to eternal life? How do I want to be treated if I don't believe in eternal life? If I really, that this is it? How do we educate people to make these decisions? What's the difference between the medical response in these issues, which tells me how something is happening? This cell mutated. This virus attacked you. This is, as opposed to the spiritual question, not how, but why? Why? You ever had a conversation with somebody who's in distress? They know what's going on. They'll turn around to you and they'll say, I know that, but why? Why is this happening? It's the Job question. So these three wild cards, I'm going to suggest to you, really go into how we make a decision. They are very, very subjective. So if you take the fundamental ethic and you overlay that with the three wild cards that go into how we make a decision that impact us, then can we then develop a theory based upon this of how to make a Jewish decision. Obviously, the question begs the answer. It's the obviously question. The answer is yes. The theory is the following: three initials: V, V, C, V. Oh no, I lied to you. VCC. Value. Every time I try to be funny about it, I mess up. Value, context, choice. Value, context, choice. What is the value that underscores and informs the foundation of the should be the basis of your decision? In the beginning of life, it may be the value of pru or vu, be fruitful and multiply. And so the Jewish tradition across the denominational lines has expanded their interpretations to include artificial insemination, IVF, surrogacy, surrogate mothers, etc., etc., etc. Across the denominational line. Adoption. Why? The value of Peru or Ru, being fruitful and multiplying. At the end of life, that value from the Talmud, pikuach nefesh doche et hashabbat. The saving of a life is so important that you can abrogate even the laws of Shabbat. So here's my question to you. First one gets in, buzz in. In Judaism, is the saving of a human life and the perpetuation of human life an absolute, unequivocal value? Yes or no? Anybody want to hazard a guess? It's either a yes or no. Andrea, you're shaping, I don't know
Yes.
what shaking your head means.
Yes.
Yeah. Who said that? Did Andrea say that?
Rita.
No. Who's saying that? Rita?
Yes.
Okay. This is not, if I can unmute, you can unmute. Nancy, is your hand up? Nancy? Earth to Nancy?
Mute. Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, what?
And may I just say,
Wait, time out.
oh,
Yes, what? Yes, what?
yes, we save a life.
So, okay.
I would say,
But I just want to say, can I just ask? I just recently realized that abortion is okay for Judaism to
Yes,
save the life of a mother. So
yes.
that, this is all complicated. So it is who's alive. Yes.
The proof text for the Jewish proof text for abortion is from the book of Exodus. You'll be reading it in a couple of weeks. And the commentary on that is from the Talmud Oholot, Masechet Oholot, which talks about when it's permissible to literally take the life of the fetus. The distinction is when the head emerges, because then you breathe and it becomes, instead of a fetus, it becomes a nefesh.
Yeah.
If you haven't studied this, it's very important because not only politically, but Jewishly.
Yes.
Alan,
Rabbi, I would say it's not absolute.
okay.
There's circumstances where you don't have to save a life.
Okay. So for those of you who said yes, it's absolute, the answer is Alan's. The answer is no. Now, this comes as a shock to a lot of people because we're always taught you save life. And the answer is you save life. However, then there's a ton of midrash on this. Because Judaism is a very, very sophisticated religious civilization. This is not, as I've told you, Judaism is not for children. The fairy stories, the miracle stories, they're for children. They can understand that. But the real world, no. There's a very famous midrash. Yochanan ben Zakkai is dying. Have you been taught this? Somebody did this to you? It's a great midrash. This is, by the way, it is the classic beginning when you take a class in Jewish bioethics. In the introductory class, you'll get this midrash. If you're asking me which collection it's from, I don't remember. Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the great, great, great leaders in the intertestamental period, is dying. His followers gather around his house in Jerusalem, and they're praying. They're praying. The Mishaber, please do not let Yochanan ben Zakkai die. Please do not yet let we get. Yochanan ben Zakkai, however, is dying. His maidservant, seeing the situation, goes to the rooftop, takes a great big clay pot, throws it off the roof. The clay pot smacks against the ground, frightening the followers, and they stop praying. At the moment that they stop praying, what happens? Yochanan ben Zakkai dies. This is a proof text that basically sets the foundation for an understanding that there are times and certain situations where the fundamental ethic for dignity and sanctity would say,
Enough's enough.
it's enough. It's enough. There's an image in the Talmud, and again, if you ask me, give me the citation, I don't remember. But there's an image in the Talmud of the flame. Now, in the old days, you would light a match, but nobody smokes anymore, so you have to think about a match. Are you allowed to do this as the flame flickers down on the match? No. Can't do that. Are you allowed to let the flame eventually die out on its own? Yes. Which leads us to the second of the theories. Second value, the second one, and the one that really hinges on everything, is context. I believe in my training that Judaism is so brilliant that it understood that you have to take each case within the context of its presentation. You have to deal with the case before you. And if you are able to take a look at a slew of bioethics texts, of which there are thousands and thousands, you would see that that is the mood of Jewish tradition. You deal with the situation before you. It doesn't do you any good to say they should have done this, but they didn't. So therefore, you're left with dealing. This happens a lot in triage cases or EMT cases, which is why you need those advanced directives prominently displayed where the location of all these documentations are, and not in a safe deposit box where nobody can get them in case of an emergency. You deal with the case before you. You don't live in a land of what if or if only. If only we had done that. What if they had not done this, or what if they had, but they did. You deal with the situation in front of you. And on that basis, in that context, is how you make that decision. And thus the impact of the wild cards of autonomy, technology, and spirituality come into play in each context. Because a context for somebody who's 23 may be very different for somebody who's 83. Different situations, different experiences, different beliefs. To help Judaism and us make decisions, of where the boundaries exist, Judaism has legal halachic boundaries. This is part of the brilliance of our tradition. The number one or most famous boundary is a Hebrew word called goses, or sometimes gesisa. In the Hebrew, it's gimel vav samach samach, or gosses, goses. The Talmudic definition of goses, and there is one, is the following: a moribund patient whose death is imminent. A moribund patient whose death is imminent. In the 21st century, that definition is meaningless. Why? Because of the wild card of medical technology. You have people who are being kept alive on machinery, whose death is being delayed for a variety of reasons. They are moribund. If those machines were taken away, their death may be imminent. Or those machines are there to bridge them from inability to live to an ability to live. How do we know? The context. The context. This is where the cooperation of the medical system and the clergy have to be important. Goses. Up until you're a goses, the tradition says you should do everything in your power to pikuach the nefesh, to save that life. Once a person crosses over that boundary, you can continue to be aggressive. But in the context of that situation, it may be for dignity and sanctity to let the flame of life flicker out. These are very difficult situations and decisions, but the context is deterministic. Once you cross over, now there are tons of Jewish legal responsa from all the denominations that talk about how this works. There is a principle in medicine, and Nancy will tell me if I'm wrong, the concept of double effect. I want to do something good, but if I overdo what is good, it's going to have a negative response. So when we published this book, when I ran the Department of Family Concerns, called A Time to Prepare, this is the entire reform movement. We did this on end-of-life decision-making. Questions, answers, how to plan a funeral, documents, ethical wills, etc., etc. And in there also are a series of responsa that speak to exactly this very, very challenging part of context. Okay? Responsa are a technical legal category of literature, very ancient, continuing to be written today. So there are responsa that speak, and they are continually being written. And I'll get to some of them in a minute. They are continually being written that take a look at a lot of medical issues, that our people are dealing with on a regular basis. And the responsa traces the Jewish tradition's approach to these issues, even extremely contemporary issues. about how to make decisions, what happens in various medical situations, um, um, anything that you could possibly imagine. These are collected in a variety, in each denomination. They're published on a regular basis. They're readily available um, online and in rabbinic circles through the rabbinic websites. So, for example, here's a resolution on compassion and comfort care at the end of life. This is a resolution that our department helped write for the Union for the Reformed Judaism, favoring comfort care, palliative care, and hospice care. Because in the 80s and 90s, when hospice became very, very important, all the denominations wrote responsa saying this is a modern mitzvah. Why? Because the entry fee for the hospice, for I work with a hospice here in southern New Jersey, is a diagnosis of about 6 months, terminally ill within 6 months. In essence, to use our Jewish phraseology, that means go sace. A responsa called relieving the pain of a dying patient. Relieving the pain of a dying patient. Is pain and suffering a religious value within Judaism? Absolutely not. There is no theological Jewish value that you should have to undergo excruciating pain and suffering. You're not proving anybody. So the development of palliative care to relieve pain and suffering in a patient, to give them a greater sense of dignity and quality of life, is a modern mitzvah. So what happens in this responsa that says, well, I can relieve this person's pain by giving them a larger dose of drugs. However, in giving this person, in order to give them a greater sense of dignity and comfort, their death, which is inevitable, is going to be brought closer, perhaps by days or weeks. And we were taught that we're not allowed to do anything active to end a life. But all I want to do is end the suffering for which there is no theological value. The answer in the responsa is the following. I'll quote. In other words, we may take definite action to relieve pain, even if it is some risk to the person in the last hours of their life. In fact, it is possible to reason as follows. It is true that the medicine to relieve his pain may weaken his heart, but does not the great pain itself weaken his heart? Which is yes. And may it not be that relieving the pain may strengthen him more than the medicine might weaken him? At all events, it is a matter of judgment. And in general, we may say that in order to relieve his pain, we may incur some risk as to his final hours. This is a Jewish concept of double effect. This is across the denomination. There happened to be a reform responsa, but I'm going to give you other sources if we have time to show you others. And by the way, a time to prepare in the legal forms are all available on the website on jewishsacredaging.com. You just go to the top thing there and click on resources and you'll find a time to prepare. And there's a million options right now all over the place. So this concept of double effect, this concept of treating things, each case on its own merit, is extremely important. But there's still more gray area. For example, one of the other technical terms that is used in these conversations is the term trefa, T apostrophe R-E-F-A-H in the English. In the text within the tradition, it means marked for death, but not goseis. How does this relate to people now? Suppose you're 58 years old God forbid, and you got a diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. At the present time, there is no cure for this disease. In essence, you enter the rubric in the tradition I would submit to you of Trefa. There's no cure. So we're going to do everything in our power to make your life as comfortable as possible in dignity and in sanctity. And if you get these drugs which are coming online, if you're into clinical trial, call hakavod, do it, do it, do it. But until we have that cure, in essence, we know the end. Now, do we have to create, given the wild card of medical technology, new vocabulary? I would argue, and I've written on this, yes, I think we do. But we haven't yet. So we're left with taking traditional terms like goses and trefa and trying to constantly reimagine and reinterpret based upon the particular context. So value, context, choice. If you apply the value to the particular context, taking into consideration the wild cards and where that person is, you can then gravitate to what may be a good Jewish choice. It may be a lousy choice. Sometimes the choices, and some of you may know situations like this, are between bad and badder. And sometimes doing nothing is a choice. Sometimes letting nature take its course, whatever that means, is a choice. In fact, there is a Talmudic phrase from somewhere, don't ask me to cite the citation, called Shev v'al ta'aseh, which literally means sit v'al ta'aseh, don't do nothing. Translated into New Jerseyan, that means before we rush and make a decision, let's just see what happens. Let's just give this some time, because sometimes the body or the circumstances will make the decision for us. Value, context, choice. I would submit to you that this is based upon the wild cards of autonomy, medical technology, and spirituality. This is the formula that I really suggest to you. I've seen it work. To be honest with you, I've used this in my own rabbinate. I've used this with my own family. Sometimes it's very difficult because you're dealing with real live people. But this formula, this theory that I'm suggesting to you, I've seen it work. Now, to bring it up to even, all right, to bring it up into even more contemporary times, the same theory now in the legislation that's being enacted around the country. There are 10 jurisdictions who have medical aid in dying. The country of Canada has legalized medical aid in dying. Is Colorado? Colorado has medical aid in dying? Okay.
I
Did
think it
not know.
does.
So this is the law in New Jersey became law in 2019. It's based on the Oregon law, which is over 20 years old. The debate in the New Jersey legislature was for a long, 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 long time. The traditional Jewish community lobbied against it. The Catholic Bishops Organization lobbied against it. The medical community went both ways, but the law passed. It was challenged immediately. The Supreme Court of New Jersey argued in favor of the law. So the law became and has been in existence since 2019. So therefore, and there are many states that have bills in process somewhere in their legislature. Given the certain circumstances now, I don't know how many of them will see the light of day because there's very powerful lobbying against it. But the denominations immediately, the conservative movement and the reform movement, studied it. They went to the appropriate committees in the conservative movement and the reform movement. And last year, both issued a lengthy responsa on medical aid in dying. In essence, we don't have the time to unpack it because they're very, very, very long and complex. In essence, and this should not surprise any of you, much of the conversation was, this is horrible. The people in this certain circumstances, but in certain context, we would give an okay. And they list the context, which are basically what the laws, the many hoops, because you have to jump through a whole series of hoops in order to have the doctor write the prescription. It's not, the doctor does not, the person themselves has to ingest the cocktail or give themselves the injection. I've been involved with 2 such cases in the last year here in southern New Jersey, one last month. And in many cases, it followed exactly this theory. Both of these individuals were terminal. Both of these individuals had exhausted medical technology. They had exhausted what was possible. They could continue if they wished to be treated, but the doctors both said, we can continue to treat you. We may be able to give you a couple of months, but not more. Both of these individuals said, enough. I know the game. I know my wishes, autonomy. Technology has done everything that it can. Both individuals had extensive meetings with their families, explaining what their wishes were, and eventually both sets of families agreed. Both this man and this woman ended their life on their terms, etc. You can't do this if you're dealing with any type of mental health thing. The laws are very, very complex. But the point being that even here, as this is being played out now in medical aid in dying, the responsa committees went back, traced this thing through, starting with the Yochanan ben Zakkai thing, throughout Jewish history, and they came to an opinion based upon the scholar's understanding of text, as well as the context of the individuals. Thus, again, value, context, choice. None of this is easy. It's very personal and involves a tremendous amount of issues, such as, well, what the words dignity and sanctity mean, quality of life. There's probably 18 people on the screens. There's probably 18 different opinions of what my quality of life means to me at this stage of my life. And we don't know what that quality of life definition for me will be 10 years from now. We don't know. until we get there. That's why if you have an advanced directive, you have to update it every 5 to 7 years because the technology changes. So all of this fits together. And there's a ton of other things. I just said you have time to prepare. There's a wonderful book by Elliot Dorff. I may have mentioned this to you before. I mentioned the Jeff Levin book on Matters of Life and Death by Elliot Dorff, Dorff, who's the leading spokesman for this in the conservative movement. He co-chairs the conservative movement's Responsa Committee. It's called the Committee on Law and Standards, I think. This is a book about that thick. It was published I think in the early part of this century by Jewish Publication Society. I think that's who published it. And it is a very, very good textbook. Again, it's not a beach book, but it's a readable. You don't have to have a PhD in obtuse rabbinics to get through it. It's written for people like me who just needs to have it, decoded so I can understand it in matters of life and death. And this is a recently published book. I don't know whether you can see it. It says Jewish Guide to Practical Medical Decision Making. Jewish Guide to Practical Medical Decision Making. This is written by Rabbi Jason Weiner. Jason Weiner, he's done a podcast for me on this book and his new book, which is sitting back on the third shelf down, back there. Jason is the chief of spiritual care at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. He is an Orthodox rabbi, and so this book is filled with the same situations, but it's written from the Orthodox perspective. So his chapter on supporting patients who request physician-assisted suicide will come down a little bit differently than the scholars in the conservative and reform movements Responsa Committee. But to also go back to where we started with Nancy's concern about how you talk to people, all of this affirms the necessity of empathic, understanding, conversations, and training, which puts the burden a lot on teaching people, clergy, professionals of how to talk and understand this, which is why we're in favor of every congregation has to have this type of a conversation every single year. What does Judaism say about this? Why does it say about this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Because there are people who not on this call who don't think they need to talk about this. A year from now, they're going to be living it. So in conclusion, because it's already 9:15, you've been very quiet. This is really important because there are people who are living in this right now. In every single congregation, there are people living. What are we going to do? How do we make a decision? The doctors have exhausted the arsenal of medical technology. What can we do? And it is a very sometimes painful decision that can interrupt families. I'll give you, I'll give you a perfect example. The first time I ever ran into this as a rabbi, when I was a kid rabbi, in my first congregation, and this woman named Sheila was dying of cancer. She was about 32, 34 years of age. This is when I was in Westlake Village, California. She had been treated at Northridge for a year. Her husband came to me, we went out to lunch. He said, I got to talk to you. We went out to this horrible Italian restaurant next to a Kmart off of Hampshire Avenue. Never forget this, because it was the first time, not in class where it's theoretical, but a human being is sitting across from me. I'm his rabbi, and he's saying, my wife has decided to end treatment. She wants to come home. They can keep her comfortable. There's nothing more than they can do. They can give her more chemo, more radiation. It's only going to give her another 6 months of life. She doesn't want the pain. She wants to come home, be surrounded by her garden, her family, her children, and be at peace. This was before hospice was started in my town. He said, "What can I do?" Because her brother is screaming at me that I'm killing my wife. I'm killing his sister. We should do everything in our power, even if it means putting her under excruciating trouble, and she doesn't want it. This woman came home. Her husband supported her. Some of her family were angry as hell. But it was this woman understanding the context. Now, suppose she had said, "I don't care what they say. I want more," because there's always hope. There could be some. The tradition would have said, go for it. It's your choice." But she was go says, and she was within that time frame, and she made this decision. This is very complicated stuff, but you need to know that our tradition has an approach, has opinions, and I suggest you each even has a theory that can help guide somebody make a decision. And often those decisions are between bad and badder. So that always go back to that fundamental ethic. No matter what, we are the fan of the dignity and sanctity of human life and the preservation of human life in dignity and in sanctity. And dignity and sanctity, yes, can be very subjective and change at various parts of our life. And that's why you have to constantly, constantly keep this in front of people, because my sense of dignity and sanctity at 30, I guarantee you, is not the same as when I'm 80 or 90 or 95 or whatever, because the contexts change. Okay, any comments? This is a lot of information, I know, but this is tough stuff. It's not easy stuff.
I, I just want to say thank you for presenting on this. This is really, really good to hear. It's really good to talk about. And I think it just seems like a lot of people even are afraid to talk about it.
Yes, most people are afraid to talk about it.
Rabbi, you've mentioned a number of titles that you say are not airplane or beach blanket books to read. Do you have one that's a title that's more in layman language that's easier to digest than having to look up every other word with theory?
You know, let me just check someone here. I'm, um, there's actually an article that if I can find it electronically, I will send it to you.
Okay,
It kind of like almost reduces everything we've done for the last hour and a half into about 6 or 7 pages, but with resources, so you know you can say, okay, I can read this and kind of get an understanding of it. I don't know where I have it electronically. I have to go back and research it and find out even where it may. You just have to give me some time.
okay. Sherry has my email address.
Okay. I will put this study guide electronically to you probably tomorrow morning, and then you can distribute it. And if I can find this article, um, I'll try and get that to you as well. Okay.
Thank you.
And if you know how to get a hold of me, so if there's a question, you can just always email me at rabbi address at jewishsacredaging.com. Any other questions, or because we have 5 more minutes? Any other questions, comments? Once,
You know,
But
Rabbi,
yeah,
I would also like to thank you very much for coming here and speaking. I just want to share, um, if I could, a little of my own experiences. I was there at, um, hopefully if I can, I was there at bedside with my dad, my brother, and my mother when they all passed. And with my mom, it was really interesting because it just so happens you're at the hospice there on Highway 73, correct?
oh yeah, the Samaritan.
Right.
Yeah, I work with them.
Okay. And anyway, she was 93 when she finally went. And I happened to be there at her home and it was coming the last days. And her sister, fortunately, she was lucid enough, her sister in Israel, explained it may be a better choice than just staying at home, which my mother insisted on, was to go to a hospice and let them have the burden of once she's passed instead of me having it.
Well, it's
And it was great having her have a choice. I was actually on a Zoom call, just inches from her bedside when she went on a meeting, and she just, that was her choice to go there. So it's nice to have a
I-
choice.
it the choice factor is extremely important. Hospice is brilliant. I mean, the people at Samaritan do unbelievable, wonderful things. Um, but they and I know those people. I mean, I know those people very well. But I was just on a meeting with them last week. Um, and the idea of comfort care and keeping people dignity and keeping somebody's dignity and with the family, and because I know the idea is to age in place and even die at home, but sometimes that's not possible. Just the caregiving and equipment can be a burden on. I mean, I just was dealing with a guy from my former Kahawi, and who died in August, and he was at home in hospice. He had home hospice. They brought in the bed and all the equipment and everything, but it's a tremendous. I mean, his wife wanted to do that. His family wanted to do that because they felt that that was the best thing for him and them, and that was the right decision. But not every family can do that. And when you factor in long distance, it sometimes is just impossible. It's just impossible.
Mhm.
That's why every case it's contextual. You deal with the case before you. And
Right.
sometimes that tension of letting go and holding on is very, very palpable. Very, very palpable. To let go, even to cede care to somebody, placing somebody in a facility can be a heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, emotional
Yeah.
trauma. But it needs to be talked about. People need to know that there's guidance from our tradition. It's not all just made up Bubba Mice's stories. This is real stuff with real people living this every single day. Sherry, did you? Yeah. Oh, Jeff.
Rabbi, I wonder if you're not getting a lot of comments because you didn't ask how many in the audience here have been through, just like the gentleman who just spoke, have been through this with a parent, a sibling, a partner, a child, even. Um, because I think that it's very helpful listening to you, but some of us have been through it. And so um, I know this is not a therapy group,
No,
or
it's not.
but I think that I'd be interested to know how many people have been in this experience,
So let me explain something to you. My job is to present the text. It's not a therapy group.
right?
Given my experience and the numbers of people and I'm going to be honest with you, the age of the people on this, I made the assumption that the majority of us have walked this walk, me included. Um, if this was just the subject of the 4 weeks, we could then unpack a lot of personal experience.
I know that's not what you're about here.
But no, but if we started to listen to everybody's personal stories, all of which are very, very valid, we would have needed more than an hour and a half. And to lay out, even on a bare bones basis, the text. So we even didn't have the time to go through some of the midrash and some of the more elaborate explanations of the responsa, because it seems like a long time, an hour and a half. But to really try to condense about 3,000 years of Jewish history on very complex situations, um, I would suggest to you that if you wanted to do something of great value for the congregation, given let this session percolate a little bit. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't start have one or two sessions where people could share their own stories and say, "This is what I learned," and I want to tell you about it because some of you may then reap benefit from my experience, and somebody you may know will have a similar experience. But that's a separate.
Right.
That's a very separate session, and with and the facilitator to do that also has to know how to handle that.
You know what, Rabbi? We have a sofa at the temple downstairs there. I'll take a picture of it and we'll have a new series at the couch at Temple Aaron,
That's right.
on the couch at Temple Aaron,
On
and
that
have
that
this. I mean, this is, yeah, it could be great
it could
conversations.
it could be, and I think it'd be very valuable. But it really needs to be, orchestrated correctly. So it also doesn't become a bitch session, a gripe session, or it. Well, I've all been, or that doctor did this. I'll never. You don't need that. It's counterproductive. But
Right.
the understanding of people's journeys, this image of that's why the wilderness experience in the book of Exodus is the major metaphor in Judaism, because we're all on this journey. We are all in the wilderness.
Hmm. Maybe we all make nice choices.
I hope so. It is 9:30. I will see you or 7:30 where all of you live. Um, I will see you hopefully for the final session on rituals, which is going to be a whole different, and that's really a lot of fun. Wait till you hear some of this stuff. Some of it's very, very, it's just fun, and some of it's very, very, very serious, and somewhat controversial on one or two of the issues, but I'll let you be the judge of that. So in the meantime, have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay warm. Uh, don't let your pipes freeze. That's my job to the next 3 nights. I've been instructed I got to turn the taps on certain things so my pipes don't freeze. Who Michigas? But I don't want to get yelled at by my wife. Um, Stay
Good.
safe, everybody.
Good
Thank
choice.
you,
Take care.
Rabbi.
See
Thank
you
you.
next
Thank
Monday.
you. Thanks,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
very
Thank
much.
you
much.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. It's
Oh,
wonderful.
You.
Rita, did you want to say something, Rita? Oh, you're just saying bye. Okay. Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you. Thank
Have
you.
a good night. And Sharon, since you're still on, I just want to say, Sharon, I'm very sorry about your friend.
Yes. Yeah.
Sherry, I see you're still on, so I'll say something real quick if you can hear me. If you would like to receive the rabbi's materials, I would just need your email address. I don't think we have your email address.
I think we're still recording.
Okay, I
Bye.
will end the recording.